This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
The views expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of WPSL. However, we do encourage you to like and share them on Facebook. Howard Insurance in Port St. Lucie now presents the African American Scene, hosted by Rudy Howard.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. Always glad to be with you here on a Wednesday night. Oh, my. What chaotic days we've had since the election. I'm going to talk about the Electoral College tonight. A lot of times, we talk about things and we don't really know what we're talking about. So I'm going to try to give you some insight and education in exactly how Electoral College works and how it was started. And I encourage you to call in and with any questions that you might have. I'll just tell you that Medicare season is officially ended on the 7th, and we're now in Marketplace or Obamacare season until next Tuesday. So if you are looking for health insurance, please give me a call. I was a little rusty because I hadn't done it for 2 years, but they brought some markets back into our area, so I jumped back into it this year for the first time in 2 years, and I'm now pretty versed on it. We got a new company in the area, Oscar. Not too familiar with them, but they have some plans available, and we have Cigna. And, of course, that's a name everybody knows. So if you need health insurance, give me a call. And you can stop by Walmart. I'll be there tomorrow, Friday, and Monday will be my last day. No more Walmart until October. So let me before I get into the Electoral College, allow me to make a couple of statements. I'm pretty disgusted on where we are right now in this country, and especially on some of the double standards that my conservative friends like to portray. If Black Lives Matter had come out with firearms, armed to the teeth in protests, you would have gone absolutely crazy. You went crazy when they were out marching in the streets. Yes, and there was some looting, but they weren't carrying firearms and shooting people in the streets or threatening people with firearms. And I don't know, we are in a bad state of affairs in this country as far as our division is concerned. I don't know if there's a way back. I sure hope so. But I'm not very optimistic, and that's not like me because I'm usually a very optimistic guy. One of the things that I want to ask you before I get into this electoral college thing, and this is a question that you're free to call about for the rest of the show, is what concerns you about a Democratic administration? I have a strong suspicion that many of you have concerns that are unfounded in reality. And I think that as a person that's been very active in the community, I can feel free to speak about what you might be able to anticipate from a Democratic administration. So, if you will, please, let me have it, 340-1590, 340-1590. Please tell me what your concerns are. What I want to do, as much as possible, I try to do it every Wednesday, and some of you dismiss it. You have been lied to so much, and you have accepted it because somehow, and let me give complete credit to the Republican Party, they have made you feel as though belonging to the Republican Party, you belong to an exclusive country club organization, and there is a certain level of dignity and honor to belong to the Republican Party. And so they can lie to you, and you accept it because you're a member of the Republican Party and you're a conservative. So what am I talking about? Let me just give you one real clear example that I can remember when I first started this show. Guys used to call me up and harass me all the time about when I said conservative trickle-down economics is a joke. It's fake. It doesn't exist. And I can remember I had a little old man come here one Wednesday when I was here, and he bought play money, and he bought me little boats, and he said, "This is what trickle-down economics is. A rising tide will lift all boats." Well, folks, if you ever thought that was true, I want you to look at what's happening today. The stock market is soaring. We got people in food lines and people on unemployment. Where the heck is the trickle down? There is no trickle down. But you have been told since Reagan that that is the key to a vibrant economy, trickle down. Lied to you to your face, and you accept it.
You know how lies work, right?
Oh, yeah.
Put a little bit of truth in with them, like the laws of gravity, and trickle-down economics sounds feasible.
Yes, it does.
It sounds
When I first heard it, and I said this some years ago, if I had never tried it and I heard the theory has some plausibility.
Yeah.
But what the theory doesn't incorporate is man's greed. And so for trickle down to work, the people at the top have to want to invest the money down the line into the people and into the vendors to which they buy. And that doesn't happen.
right. We get this illusion that it just falls into place all by itself,
Yes,
like gravity.
exactly. So the way we were sold on it by Reagan is that you don't even have to worry about it. If you push that money up the line, it'll come falling down and we'll all benefit. Well, okay. Now you know for sure that's an absolute lie. It doesn't work, never did work, but you bought it. And I'm going to give you one more example, okay? And I want you to tell me why you have reservations about a Democratic administration taking over the United States. I want to hear it. Give it to me. You can be as harsh and bitter. If you say you don't like black people being in charge, you can say that too if you want. I want to hear what you have to say. Okay? I'm going to give you one more example. Then we're going to talk about the Electoral College. You were told that the Obamacare was going to destroy us, that Obamacare had death squads and was going to be responsible for seeing over your grandmother and grandfather's death. Another lie. It cost a lot of Congress people their seats in the midterms in 2010. But guess what? Today people like the Affordable Care Act. It has over 60% positivity rating. But you were lied to, and you voted against it, and now you want it. So what didn't you see back then that you see now? What you see is you have friends and neighbors and relatives who have been helped by the Affordable Care Act. And all of a sudden, it's not such an evil thing. So those are just two examples, but I am just really interested because I want you to straighten me out. Maybe you can set me on the right path by telling me what you think the Democratic Party is going to do to this country when they take over. Okay? Again, that number is 340-1590. And we can also talk about the police, again, if you'd like. And I'm going to speak out to Chuck. Chuck challenged me to look up Patrick Basham and his analysis of the election. And I did look at that, and I looked at the video. And what Patrick Basham said is he thought it was implausible. He didn't say impossible. He thought it was implausible that Biden would win given his statistical analysis of the past. Didn't say impossible, implausible. Well, I guess maybe it was plausible because he won. And when are we going to get to the point where we can say he won? And something I talked about a few weeks ago as we began to talk about this electoral college, you can now see why I'm such a strong supporter of doing away with the electoral college. Biden won by 7 million votes. He got 51% of the vote in this country, and you're fighting about whether he was duly elected. And the only reason why you're fighting about him being duly elected is because you think the Electoral College can come to the rescue. That's wrong. That is dead wrong. Because if 51% of the people spoke and said they wanted Biden to be president, that should be respected. And you should figure out how you could take some of that 51% vote and pull it over to your side instead of fighting and jury rigging and cheating to try to get the votes to put Trump back in office. And then I'm going to say this too, and I'm on a roll right now, so let me keep rolling. You wonder why he lost, and maybe I said this last week, and if I did, you're just going to have to indulge me. He called every major city in this country run by Democrats garbage. All the Democratic cities are garbage. He called the governor of Michigan a terrible human being. He absolutely was all over John McCain, the favorite son of Arizona. When the man got shot in the back in Kenosha, Wisconsin, he said nothing. And you wonder why he lost? Jesus. If I was to run a campaign, I'd be doggone if I'd run a campaign like that where I'm walking around criticizing all the people that I hope to get votes from. That was the stupidest, most idiotic way to solicit support for my campaign that I could possibly think of. Just absolutely stupid. But that stupidness is arrogance, because he has so much convinced you to follow him, he just thought that was enough. Again, that number is 340-1590. Now let's talk about the Electoral College. The Electoral Electoral College came into being at the Constitutional Convention in 1787 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And it came about because after the war and trying to figure out how to properly allocate the votes, there was disagreement. And understand that in 1787, there was no country on earth that allowed their constituents to help to pick the executive leader for the country. So they were going after something that was totally new and unprecedented. And they were in pretty tall cotton trying to design this program that would allow for the people to have a say-so about who the executive would be. Now, let me just tell you a little bit about how it comes about. Each state has congressional members. Each one of those congressional members are counted as an elector. And then you get +2. The +2 comes from the 2 senators in each state. So if you had 26 House people, you'd have the 26 +2, which is 28, and that would be your electoral count for that state. Okay? Just so you understand that's the way the process works. So the system calls for the creation every 4 years of a temporary group of electors. And I just explained to you, the electors are equal to the total number of representatives in Congress. And these electors, the American people vote for, and the electors are actually the ones who make the president. It was never the intention that it would be a perfect system. The system was created out of compromise. At the time of the Philadelphia Convention, no other country in the world directly elected its chief executive. So the delegates were wading into uncharted water. Further complicating the task was a deep-rooted distrust of executive power. Now, we have to remember, we had just freed ourselves from a tyrannical king and overreaching colonial governors. And they did not want another type of government to follow in those footsteps. So what they did, well, let me give you first the background. One group of the delegates felt strongly the Congress shouldn't have anything to do with picking the president. Too much opportunity for chummy corruption between the executive and the legislative branches. Another camp was dead set against letting the people elect the president by a straight popular vote. First, they thought the 18th century voters lacked the resources to be fully informed about the candidates, especially in the rural outposts. Now, I'm going to say to you, that makes sense. In the 18th century, that reasoning makes a lot of sense. The lack of communications that existed at that time would be very hard to educate people all across the country on issues that of importance for our government. The second was they feared a headstrong Democratic mob steering the country astray. And the third was a populist president appealing directly to the people could command dangerous amounts of power. Isn't that interesting? The third was a fear of a populist president appealing directly to the people could command dangerous amounts of power. Now, as interesting as that part is, finally we go to the part that is also tied in with this whole process. By determining exactly how many electors to assign to each state was another sticking point. Here the divide was between slave-owning and non-slave-owning states. It was the same issue that plagued the distribution of seats in the House of Representatives. Or shouldn't the founders include the question was, should they founders include slaves in counting the state's population? So there was some concern about actually counting slaves in the state's population, which would inure to the benefit of the southern states. In 1787, roughly 40% of people living in the southern states were enslaved black people who couldn't vote. How about that? The enslaved people accounted for 60% of the population in Virginia. So, what did they do? In order to come up with what they felt was an equitable situation, they counted slaves as 3/5 of a person. Think about that. The result was the controversial 3/5 compromise.
That obviously was not a mathematical decision.
No, it was not.
Because in that time, the average black man was probably far physically superior to the white man.
That's very true.
And even today in sports, look at sports, look at music.
Oh,
Musical creation, sporting events. Okay, so you want to? That's been knocked down to what, 3/5 of a person?
Yes.
When they're actually like maybe twice the man.
They had to be, just first of all. I don't want to get this into a real harsh discussion. To make that trip from Africa to the United States, you had to have some intestinal fortitude.
Yeah, and it wasn't a pleasure cruise.
No. So only the strong,
Yeah, they
the
had to
very
survive,
strong,
yeah.
survived that cruise. And if
Weak, sick people died on those ships.
Yes, yeah. And they took, when people got sick, they threw them in for shark bait. And listen, so you're right. The black people that made it, they were of superior physical strength. So, but anyway, I don't want to get too far into the weeds on that. The result was the controversial 3/5 compromise, in which enslaved black people would be counted as 3/5 of a person for the purpose of allocating representatives and electors and calculating federal taxes. The compromise ensured southern states would ratify the Constitution and gave Virginia, home to more than 200,000 slaves, a quarter of the total electoral votes required to win the presidency. So just think about that. So some time ago, Brian called up and tried to make the case that the 3/5 was not anything negative. Well, I think I think you can say.
Some mathematical subtraction. That's unfair right there.
Well, and listen, and here's the real irony of this. That's important to keep in mind. They counted the slave people as 3/5 because it helped to give power of the government to the southern states. Yet the black people who were counted as 3/5 could not vote. So they were counted as part of the population. The resources were allocated based in part on the 3/5 of black people that existed, but they were forbidden to vote for those resources and allocations that were to come to the states in question, like Virginia. So there you have it. That's where the Electoral College came from. Now, I talked about this before, and I may have said something about this in the beginning. The Electoral College makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I said to you when I was giving you the historical perspective, the original assertion that people in the rural areas would not be knowledgeable about the current issues that might be pertinent to running the government made sense. It absolutely made sense. But this, fast forward to 2020. Anybody, anywhere can find out anything in minutes. I mean, in absolute minutes. And if you actually, unfortunately, live in a place where you don't have any internet, you can go to the library for free and access the library and get information. So that argument for the Electoral College makes no sense. And again, the point that I made a couple weeks ago, and I'm going to make it again. If there was no electoral college, you wouldn't have a sectional fight like we're having right now. Because your obligation, if you're running for election, would be to secure the votes of all people, not little segments of people, not counties, as Chuck called up and was talking about what this Patrick Besham said. Is true. Trump won all the counties, but when he said that last week, I thought it was true. But that's not the issue. The issue is who got the most votes. So if you have to go out and win the votes, you have to speak issues to the people that are going to vote for you in order for them to cast their vote on your behalf. I believe, as a somewhat of a history buff, I believe that was the intent all along, that people with the best ideas would win. Now, let me say another thing that's very important for you to understand about the Electoral College. In 1787, when they designed the system, there were no parties. There were no parties. And there was actually a provision in the Constitution that has a creation for the Congress to take over in the event of a tie. With the creation of parties and party loyalties and states pledging electors to the winner of the party, that has not come into play. I think, if I recall in reading it, I think it's happened one time in all the presidential elections where the Congress actually had to come into play to provide for an election. Again, that phone number is 340-1590. That's 340-1590. And, you know, I would ask my conservative brothers and sisters, please do your part. Stop this stupid, bogus crap about this being a fraudulent election. You lost. It's okay to lose. Sometimes losing hurts very much. I can remember playing in games where I played my heart out and I lost. And I went in the locker room and cried because I tried so hard and I still lost, but I lost. And I didn't hate the team that beat me. I just knew that I had tried very hard and I didn't win. That is the nature of who we are. You try hard and sometimes you don't win. That's okay. There's no harm in that. But you have to be able to accept it. And you have got to stop this dangerous game of saying that the vote was a fraud and the vote was stolen. It's harmful. It's harmful to our democracy. It's harmful to our country. And we need to stop it. So that was a mean call?
Well, questioning your ability and your integrity, and he just wanted to fight.
That's okay.
Okay.
Let him come. Let him come.
Oh, he wants to challenge you. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Let him come.
Just remember now, I don't allow filibustering. But yeah, okay. 340-1590.
Yeah. Let him come. I don't have no fear. But anyway, so just give that some thought about some of the things that I've said, because I think they're really important for you to consider. And we have John on line one. Yes, sir.
Yes. First and foremost, I'd like to say that I rarely listen to your show. I listen to the stations for Larry Elder.
Okay.
And I realize that you own a business and you sponsor the radio show and you get to spew some of the information that you give out over the radio any way you see fit. But for you to say that after Black Lives Matter started, there were no victims.
I didn't say that.
That's what you said. You
No,
said
I did not say that. No, I did not. I did not say that. What I said was, if you're going to repeat, if you're going to quote me correctly. I said if Black Lives Matter carried guns to their protests in the manner in which the protests have carried guns to governors and representatives' house, people would have been up in arms. That's what I said.
But you know fairly well that there were, in Georgia alone after George Floyd, there was 30 people who died. In Seattle, there were 19. Am I right or wrong?
The point, I don't remember the exact number, but yes, there were some people that died.
Okay.
But the cause of what?
But you can't just say that Black Lives Matters didn't cause any violence. My friend, the point I'm trying to make to call you is, as a conservative, I would like to have a conversation with a person like you and have a constructive conversation.
I'm all about that.
Okay, well, great. But the point that I want you to understand from my point of view is, as a Cuban American, I would love for you to read a book that's no longer published, unfortunately. It's called The Fourth Floor by Earl E.T. Smith, ambassador to Cuba in 1957 to 1959. He describes completely how Cuba was taken over. Completely. And if you read that book, and I can't give it to you, I have a copy of it. It's no longer published. It's the exact same thing that's happening in the United States today, with the
By-
exception of big tech.
By
Media put Fidel Castro in power. The New York Times did a front page story on Fidel Castro, making him a Robin Hood.
Well,
they
my
went to
friend,
the Sierra Maestras in Cuba.
okay,
and they
yes.
interviewed him because they thought he was dead. And when they found him in the mountains, they made him look to the American people like he was a Robin Hood. Free medicine, free this, free that, free education. You know, in Cuba, they are reusing plastic gloves for surgery. They fill them up with water to see if there's any more leaks.
Okay,
If we continue on
now,
the path that we're going.
Okay, wait. No, I happen to be, I'm a little bit of a history buff, so I accept part of what you're saying. I have a very, very good friend of mine who's Cuban and has educated me from time to time. He might even be listening tonight about some of the issues that you just talked about. So I feel fairly able to talk about it. Plus, I do some reading. Well, I do a lot of reading. And when you talk about Fidel Castro and his approach to how he took over Cuba, you don't see any similarity between Fidel Castro and Donald Trump?
On the contrary, I see more.
No. I'm talking about from the pure domination, control aspect of how Fidel Castro did it in Cuba. You don't see any similarity.
No, absolutely not. On the contrary, Donald Trump was never a politician.
But the fact that he wasn't a politician doesn't make him not capable of doing those things.
People of the United States voted for Donald Trump because of the fact that he just wasn't a politician. They're looking for change. We can no longer tolerate the corruption and the stuff that's going on in the so-called swamp.
Oh, my
If
God,
you have, listen,
John.
I have 20 years in education. And I'm telling you, the moment that prayer was tossed out of public education, it has begun the downfall of this country, because morality and the family structure has completely gone away. Women have to move out of the house, fathers have to work 2 and 3 jobs, women have to work 2 and 3 jobs. The kids are raised locked door room children, as they call it.
Latchkey
I can
kids.
go on and on and on, my friend.
No, you can't, because some of what you said really just doesn't add up. Because let me just tell you why I say it doesn't add up.
And you know what I don't like to call, because I know that this makes your show entertainment, and when you spark somebody to call, you get higher ratings. But let's go. I can go with you all night if you want.
Well, that's it. Look, that's the idea. If you want to call up,
see, but
but you know why? But you know why?
Unless you let me. First of all, let me tell you, I have a 215 license and I have a 220 license.
Mm-hmm.
I don't practice it, and I'm an educator for 28 years.
Mm-hmm.
I have a master's degree and I'm published.
Okay.
And I'm telling you that if I had the time to sit there with you in your radio show and had a constructive debate just on education alone, I maybe can let you see that, number one, the fact that the family structure, the complete family structure, has been dissolved, and Black Lives Matter has no buts and buts about it. They stand to destroy the nucleus of the family.
That's absolutely not true. That's not true.
Well, read their.
I've read. Listen. You know what? You might be an educator, John, but don't think. I would sit down with you any day you wanted to sit down and we could have a debate. And I promise you, you better come loaded because I know a whole lot about a whole lot of stuff. And I'm not a lightweight that you won't deal with. I'm just going to tell you that.
That's why I called you. And I think at least I brought to the attention that you can't say Black Lives Matter. There was no violence involved.
I didn't say that.
People in Georgia died and 19 died. And you have to come out and say that. You can't just say, because people were carrying arms and because...
You can't tell me what to say, John. I said what I said. It was a factual. What I said was a factual statement. I said if Black Lives Matter was carrying arms the way these people have been carrying arms up to people's houses, there would have been a outroar all over this country. What would have been out of control. I said that, and I believe that, and I'll stay with that.
Anytime any radical group comes out with arms, whether it be Black Lives Matters, whatever group you want to use, whatever terminology, if anyone comes out with arms, you're provoking an incident, you're causing an outright reaction from the public. So
are you against those people that are coming out with arms against people that won't overturn the election?
No. Now we're going apples to oranges.
No, I'm just asking, are you against those people? Now, you said any time people come out and protest with arms, that's an improper thing because it's inciting agitation. So I want you to be consistent. Or are you against those people that came out with arms to the Secretary of State's house in Michigan with her 4-year-old son inside and stood outside screaming at her? Are you against that?
That was improper. I totally don't agree with that.
Okay.
Simply because
all right.
It is a demonstration of violence.
Okay.
There's other ways to protest.
All right. Well, okay, now we're on the same page. Yeah, okay.
But you can't completely shut those people off because what they're trying to protest is the fact that she's closing down small businesses. If you want to talk about Michigan and the governor of Michigan and the protest that went on there, she's closing down small businesses. Do what I tell you to do, not what I do. That's what she did. Her husband was out fishing. He got caught red-handed.
He was fishing?
You can't tell the people of Michigan and Los Angeles to shut down their businesses, and then you go to a restaurant and eat real lobster and steak without a mask.
I'm with that.
Okay.
No argument here about that.
Because I can sit here and go on and on, and I am not a crazy conservative, but I do stand for the Second Amendment, and you can't take my gun away. That's for sure. My guns.
I don't want to take your gun away. I don't want anybody taking mine away either.
Okay, well that's good.
Okay.
Because when the real problem stirs up, somebody has to defend this country. Because the number one problem that will occur when, if in fact they start trying to do things like that and trying to take your privacy away and try to take your business away and closing down, like what happened in Cuba, then you and I have to go and defend the country somehow.
That's not going to happen.
You believe that's not going to happen?
I am 100% sure that's not going to happen. And you know why that's not going to happen, John? I'm going to tell you why it's not going to happen. Because Democrats don't believe in that either. You want to paint us with that brush. I do not. Wait. Now you're going to listen to me for a second. I do not have a friend who would be in favor of having their business seized by the government. And most of my friends own businesses. Not one. There's not one of my friends that I can think of that would be in favor of the government seizing their business.
You know what the phrase was in Cuba when Fidel Castro took power? Fidel is communist. Put me on the list first. That was one of the phrases in Cuba. If Fidel is communist, put me on the list first.
Well, John,
all those people that got put on the list first went to jail first because they were a threat to his government.
Well,
Their businesses were taken away.
Well, I'm just going to tell you, if you're being honest, if you're a student of history, and I think I am, I'm not a history professor, but I'm a student of history, you know there are some very strong similarities to Donald Trump and Fidel Castro. Very strong.
On the contrary.
No, there is very strong. There's very strong similarities between Fidel Castro and Donald Trump. Very strong.
Don't say that. The only people that are similar is Ocasio-Cortez and that radical bunch up there of congresswomen.
No. Well, okay, if that's what you...
spewing a lot of nonsense that I really, really don't... And that's a whole other topic for another hour. We could go on for another hour. I think that in his whole political career, Joe Biden has never been left. I think he's been more middle of the road.
Okay, we agree on that.
In fact, I believe that Joe Biden has done less for the African American community than ever I've seen anyone. But I don't think that he got a lot of votes from the African American community. I think that more of the youth of America has voted for Joe Biden.
John,
they have not been educated enough to know what's going on.
John, you're not educated. If you don't think that Biden won the African American vote, you need to pick up and do some reading and do an analysis of what the results were from the election, because you are just dead wrong on that.
Yeah, I don't think that the only African American vote that he got was in Atlanta, and
oh God, don't do that.
It was
don't
a water main break, and everybody got tossed out of it, and then there was no water main break. So I don't know.
Don't do that. You're falling into the racist trap. You're falling into the racist trap, and you're Cuban. So I'm especially ashamed of you of saying that the only people that voted against Trump was Atlanta, Philadelphia, Detroit, and Milwaukee. Come on. What is that?
There is no white Cuban American. My great-grandmother was as black can be. Okay? There is no... If you talk to a Cuban American and you mention racism to them, you're blowing up the wrong tree, because in Cuba, there is no white person that doesn't have a mulatto or an African American in their family. I have more black. My uncle was more black than you, probably. So don't get me started about racism.
Do you have the same problem with the police that black men do?
All right, Rudy.
Okay, John. Well, John, I'm just let you close with this. My assistant, who's been with me 14 years, is from Cuba.
Okay.
So I think I know a whole lot about Cuba, and her father was a doctor in Cuba, and they seized his property and put him out of business, and they came here to the United States. I'll let you close. I'll let you close.
About socialism in this country.
We'll close on that, but I just want to let you know I'm just not talking off the top of my head. I have a pretty intimate knowledge of Cuba.
But you're talking you're talking about Black Lives Matters and Antifa, and you're almost suggesting that they're on the right path.
I didn't say.
Did you say Antifa?
Did you ever hear me say that?
I've never ever heard you ever support Antifa.
Thank you.
No, but you are.
Thank you, Cliff. You never heard me say that, and you're with me every week.
Every week.
Cliff has been working too hard. He's been working since this morning on the swap shop.
And I took my 6-hour lunch break.
He's never. You haven't heard me say that. Stop trying to put stuff on me that you want me to say. Because there's
You
certain
don't
things
know me. Don't put nothing on me. You
there's
have
certain
no
things
idea.
there's certain things you can believe about me because I tend to be progressive, but there's certain things I don't say, and that's one of them.
But maybe you're not saying it clear enough. You're just leaving it out for interpretation.
John, thanks for calling. You have a good evening, and call again sometime.
John's forgotten why Black Lives Matters ever came about in the first place.
Yeah.
Because of the police that are so afraid of the big, strong black man that if he's carrying a sandwich, they got to shoot him thinking it's a gun. Or if he's carrying a cell phone.
And he's being disingenuous because if you remember when the Cuban boxers came to the Olympics, and there were several interviews with some of the Cuban boxers who looked like me, okay, and interviews that were done by Joe Madison with people in Cuba, black Cubans experience prejudice. My assistant told me that black Cubans experience prejudice in Cuba. So what John said was disingenuous. Now, what I will say, I don't have any doubt that he has family members that look like me because Cubans do come the full colored rainbow just like African Americans. But to say that there was no prejudice in Cuba is just a flat out lie. But anyway, but we had that discussion. That was good. And I hope John calls again. But just remember, John, you might have a master's degree, my friend, but when you call up to talk to me, you better come ready because I'm ready always for an enlightened, educated discussion. Love them.
The problem with some master's degrees is an arrogance involved there that makes them think that they're above everybody.
Yeah.
And that's not true. They're not above everybody. We're all created equal. All of us, even me and you, Rudy.
Yes, sir. But anyway, I'd like to thank you so much for listening to the African American Scene. God bless. Be safe. And I will see you next Wednesday right here for the African American Scene.
With archives on YouTube, the African American Scene, presented by Howard Insurance, Port St. Lucie, every Wednesday evening in the 6 o'clock hour. And all these shows you can actually watch and hear the phone calls that come into this show on YouTube. Look for WPSLTV.com. That'll take you to our YouTube where you can find archives of the African American Scene. This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast on Google Home, Alexa, and the TuneIn app on your cell phone. Time right now is 7 o'clock.